Pratham Kalavadia says, how does learning about history and geopolitics help in business and investing? Subscribe and learn something new every day on Ask Abhijit Clips. Look, when it comes to business, let's talk about business first. Business is about competition. It's about competing with others who are in your field, in your industry. So what is business? It's about identifying solutions that affect society and solving those problems and monetizing the solution to those problems. And typically in any industry which is aimed at solving certain problems, you will have various actors uh, who are competing with each other in providing solutions. So you have to, in some ways, cooperate with some of them. In some cases, you have to compete with some of them. So that is extremely similar to what happens in geopolitics. We have one planet, we have different nations. Some nations stick together and cooperate when it comes to uh, their shared interests. And in some cases, you have nations that compete. In some cases, you have nations that go to war against each other. The same thing happens in business. So the principles are pretty much similar or almost the same. Investing. Now, even in investing, if you look at the geopolitical trends and if you look at the investing patterns of the various national banks like the RBI or the Federal Reserve or the Bank of Japan and all that, and you see what they've been doing the past 50 years or 100 years, then you can also learn a lot about investing and as to how they rode the various winds of change and how they uh, adapted and changed and molded their investing strategies as to what to invest in. Nations also invest in things. Every nation, the national bank will invest in gold, for instance, in US treasury bonds. Nowadays nations are dumping that, so it kind of tells you how things are going. So l- and to understand geopolitics, you obviously have to understand history well. So you know there is this book of strategy. It's a book of stratagems called The Art of War. It's written by a person called Sun Tzu, who lived in China about 2000 something years ago. And that book is used in business, even in sport. So the strategies and stratagems and tactics that you use in warfare, in geopolitics, can equally well be applied in business and in sport and even in investing. So yes, if you can significantly broaden your horizons, study history and geopolitics in detail, you will certainly be able to take the same lessons that you've learned from here, geopolitics, and apply them in business and investing and other spheres of life. So very interesting question. That's something that most people don't quite see. Very good to see this question. Akshay Kolgiri says, please tell us about Deng Xiaoping and his contribution to China's growth. So Deng Xiaoping came to power after you could say in the aftermath of the death of the great Chairman Mao. And Deng Xiaoping, he took the nation of China in a totally different direction. Under Mao, there was a lot of mismanagement. There was the cultural revolution, the Great Leap Forward, which were enormous disasters when it came to China. I don't know, close to I don't know, the death toll is between 40 and 80 million Chinese people, and these economies suffered greatly as a result. There were famines and all kinds of disasters. So Deng Xiaoping wanted a more modern approach. He wanted China to become rich and prosperous. He said, I believe that being rich is glorious and we should be rich. So he set about transforming China's economy and the way the entire nation was run. He took his inspiration from the great Singaporean dictator, benevolent dictator Lee Kuan Yew. And he said that, Lee Kuan Yew was Deng Xiaoping said that Lee Kuan Yew was fortunate that he had to only turn around the fortunes of a city-state, Singapore. So it can be done in Shanghai or whatever, but if you have a nation the size of China, it will take a lot of energy, a lot of effort, and a lot of time to achieve something similar to to what Lee Kuan Yew was able to do in just 20 years. After the advent of Deng Xiaoping, the Chinese sent lots of officials to Singapore to study the Singaporean methods, how they had gone about doing things, and then they set about replicating the same in China. So Deng Xiaoping is the guy who started the transformation of China into from a third world, extremely poor, starving nation into a nation that is now the world's second largest economy. It is Deng Xiaoping who started the process, and to a large extent, it is Deng Xiaoping who's responsible for a significant amount of China's success. And he said that China needs to hide and bide, hide your capabilities and bide your time, which means don't boast, don't publicize your greatness if you have any. Uh, Hide your capabilities, work as hard as possible, and wait for the right time. So he passed away a long time ago, but it was Mr. Xi Jinping who, I think in 2012, decided that the right time is now. And that's what started the wolf warrior diplomacy and China's belligerent, newfound belligerence, which we can now see. It's been there for a decade at least. Uh, so that's about Deng Xiaoping, the guy who totally transformed China. He started the process that transformed China, and it was during his time that China started militarizing as well. Uh, the naval build up that China now has the world's largest navy by numbers. Not necessarily the most powerful navy, but definitely the largest navy in terms of numerical strength. So all of these things that China currently enjoys, the root of all that is Deng Xiaoping. So definitely the greatest leader China produced in the past after Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong obviously did a lot of mismanagement, but obviously he also is one of the greats from the Chinese perspective. Arman Singh says if India gets the opportunity to join NATO, which in recent news we can hear, will India join it? Can it benefit us military wise? So we have to understand what the full scope of NATO is. NATO is a US led organization. It is owned by America. It is not portrayed in that manner, but it is an organization that is completely controlled by the US and completely owned by the US, because it is the Western European nations that make up NATO, and these are all American vassal states in one way or the other. The Turks are kind of on the border, on the boundary, kind of. They have a quasi-independent foreign policy, but they also have US nuclear weapons on their territory, which is controlled by the Americans, obviously. The French also have a kind of quasi-independent foreign policy, but they are in no position to not accede to the core demands of the US. So NATO is all about being controlled by the Americans, okay? And all of these nations, their militaries come under the NATO command. Now the top NATO commander at certain point in time may be a non-American, but overall it's under US control. So if India joins NATO, hypothetically, India will have to agree to put India's military under NATO command. Do you think that will be acceptable to any Indian person or to the Indian government? Impossible. And there are other things that you have to agree to, political things as well. Your nuclear weapons may come under NATO command. Well, nuclear weapons may not technically come under NATO control. The French have a completely independent set of nukes. Their nuclear weapons are deployed on nuclear submarines, which are always on patrol. So that's what gives France their nuclear deterrent, the second strike capability. The UK's nuclear weapons are essentially under US control. The UK has nuclear submarines, but the nuclear weapons, the warheads, are placed on top of American missiles. And I am 99.99999% sure that the red button, the launch button, is not in Mr. Rishi Sunak's hands. It's most likely in the Pentagon's hands. So there's a lot of compromises that you have to make if you become a part of NATO. Your military comes under NATO command. And there will be other things also which may be hidden, certain secret set of conditions that you may have to agree to. So I don't think India should become a part of NATO. I don't think India will become a part of NATO. India will cooperate with NATO and the US on certain specific issues, in those issues that are beneficial to India's national interest. India will not become part of NATO as far as I can see, ever. India is part of the Quad, which is not a military alliance officially. India also engages with various other nations in military cooperation. So I don't see NATO benefiting India military-wise. It may actually compromise India from the military perspective, because India may have to put its armed forces under NATO command, which essentially means US command. So if India gets the opportunity, India should say no. India should say that we will certainly cooperate with you. We will extend our cooperation to you based on what issue it is about, issue based cooperation. But we will not become a part of NATO and subordinate our army and military to your command. That won't happen.